I knew the baby wasn't mine the moment Isabel handed me the ultrasound photo like it was a peace offering. The timing was all wrong. The dates didn't line up. Not with the last time we were intimate, not with the travel she swore was just a girl's trip, and definitely not with the ovulation tracker I helped her set up 2 years ago. That damn app, her own digital breadcrumb trail, shattered the last illusion I'd clung to. I sat there holding a printout of someone else's child, wrapped in the silence of a million betrayals she thought she'd buried. She looked at me with that rehearsed, wounded expression, as if I were the one who broke something sacred. That was the moment something inside me died, something tender, loyal, stupid. And what was born in its place wasn't rage. It wasn't vengeance. It was cold, calm clarity. She thought I'd raise another man's child under my roof, with my name and my fortune. But not this time, not this life. She had no idea what was coming. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're tuning in from. We love seeing how our stories connect people from all around the world. Your comments and thoughts bring this community to life, and we're so grateful to have you on this journey with us. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, grab a cozy seat, maybe a cup of coffee or tea, and prepare yourself for a tale that will captivate your heart from beginning to end. Let's begin. I remember the ultrasound photo sliding across our kitchen counter like a weapon. Isabel placed it between us gently, almost tenderly, as if she hadn't detonated a bomb in our lives 5 seconds before that. Her lips curled into a smile too perfect to be real, like a woman performing grief she didn't feel. I stared at the black and white image, not because I believed the child was mine, but because I needed a moment to control the scream building in my throat. My hands didn't reach for it, they just curled into fists in my lap. She was watching me carefully, probably waiting for the expected reaction. Shock, joy, forgiveness. But all I could think about were the app notifications I'd seen on her phone months ago. Ovuline logs time-stamped when she swore she was out of town. I wasn't supposed to notice. She forgot I was the one who installed the app. I took a deep breath, looked at the picture again, then at her. "We haven't been together in nearly 2 months," I said. Her face dropped, just slightly, before she caught it. "What are you talking about? You're being paranoid, Logan. This baby is yours." But even her voice cracked. I knew the truth. The betrayal was old news now. Months old. I'd been watching her spiral in slow motion, documenting every lie, tracking every shift in her scent, her tone, her clockwork performances. She thought I was too absorbed in work to notice, too proud to question. But I saw it all, and this ultrasound was her Hail Mary. I stood from the table. "Logan, wait. Don't do this now. We can talk. I'm done talking." The moment I walked out of that room, a version of me died. The man who built his life around her, who defended her to family, who forgave the inappropriate texts from K.L. Duvant and labeled it artistic flirtation, who ignored the hotel receipts charged by mistake. That man, Logan Pierce, husband, fixer, fool, was buried right there between the sink and the espresso machine. The following days were a blur of silence and quiet calculation. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I didn't rage. That would have given her control. Instead, I crafted calm responses, neutral tones, boundaries. I left our shared penthouse in Brickell, checked into the East Hotel under a corporate alias, and disappeared in plain sight. Camilla, my older sister, was the only one who knew where I went. "I told you something was off," she whispered on the phone. "You did. And now what?" I wait. I let her bury herself. What hurt more than the affair was the ease with which she tried to replace my bloodline, with Kyl's, a man I had once brought into our circle, a man Isabel claimed was just a misunderstood artist. When I introduced him at our charity gala 6 months ago, I didn't know I was handing him a key to my home, to my wife. Kyl wasn't just gay. He was fluid, experimental, slippery. He saw people as inspiration, tools, canvas, and Isabel, she was always hungry for something more. Attention, status, indulgence. She found it in him, or so she thought. I played the long game. I reactivated the private investigator I'd used years ago when a business partner tried to siphon funds through fake shell companies. Mikhail Torres, ex-military, efficient, discreet. Within 2 weeks, he handed me photos, hotel entries, coffee shop kisses, even a morning at Kael's artist studio in Wynwood, Isabel in a silk robe, barefoot, holding a wine glass at 11 a.m. And then, the final piece, DNA analysis from the prenatal blood sample Isabel submitted for early genetic testing. I had connections. Cleo Andrade, my legal strategist, pulled strings through a friend at the lab. It came back conclusive. I wasn't the father. Kael was. And yet, she had tried to hand me the ultrasound and smile. The next time I saw her was at Camilla's condo. She'd begged to meet in neutral territory, said she wanted to save what we had. What we had. I sat across from her, Camilla quietly present on the other end of the room. Logan, please. This doesn't have to ruin everything. You're right, it doesn't. I slid an envelope across the table. What's this? Evidence, pictures, dates, DNA, a notarized letter of paternity disavowal already filed. She stared at it, blinking too fast. You had me followed? No, I had you anticipated. Her eyes flared with panic. You're going to humiliate me? I shrugged. You did that to yourself. Her voice dropped into a whisper, venomous and cracking. It's just a mistake. One mistake. No, Camilla interrupted, stepping forward. Getting the wrong milk at the store is a mistake. This is psychotic. Isabel stood, her voice now shrill. You're both insane. Kael and I were just exploring something deeper. It didn't mean I stopped loving you. That line nearly made me laugh. Instead, I nodded slowly and said the line that ended her world. I'm filing for divorce. I'm naming Kael as the biological father. You won't see a cent of my inheritance. And I'm pressing fraud for attempting to falsify paternity on legal documents, she gasped. You wouldn't. Already did. That same night, Kael tried calling me. Once, I didn't answer. He sent a text. We didn't mean for it to happen like this. I didn't respond. I forwarded it to Cleo, who added it to the file under conscious deception. Kael didn't know it yet, but he'd be subpoenaed. His art commissions from our foundation? Revoked. Gallery representation? Gone. We were the ones funding the annual exhibit in the design district. Once I pulled support, his platform crumbled, like it always does when hollow men build castles from stolen bricks. Weeks passed. I moved back into the penthouse. Isabel had been forced to relocate to a modest condo pending the divorce hearing. The building security removed her from the registry. My life, once filled with fabricated love and theatrical mornings, was quiet, free, real. Camilla visited often, bringing Marley, her daughter. We'd sit on the balcony watching Biscayne Bay shimmer under the fading sun. You okay? Camilla asked one evening. No, I replied, but I will be. This pain isn't permanent. It's information. She smiled sadly. You're stronger than you know. I didn't feel strong. Not yet. But I felt honest. For the first time in years. One afternoon, while reorganizing my office, I came across Isabel's old journal. I shouldn't have read it, but I did. The entries were scattered, indulgent, immature. One caught my eye. Kael sees me in ways Logan never did. I don't want to be a wife anymore. I want to be alive. That's when I realized she wasn't sorry. Not truly. She was mourning the loss of a fantasy, not the man she betrayed. I placed the journal in a box marked evidence, and called Cleo to prepare for the upcoming hearing. I wasn't just divorcing Isabel. I was reclaiming every inch of myself she tried to erase. When the hearing finally came, she wore white. Symbolic. A desperate. Cale sat in the gallery, sunglasses on indoors like he was shielding himself from his own reflection. My attorney presented the app logs, the travel timelines, the DNA report, her attempt to falsify paternity. Judge Florentine didn't even hesitate. Petitioner has proven breach of trust, intent to deceive, and legal fraud. Full divorce granted. Prenuptial remains enforceable. Respondent receives nothing. Isabel collapsed into her seat. Kyle slinked out quietly. And I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I simply nodded. Justice didn't need applause. It just needed to be heard. Outside the courthouse, local media tried to approach me, having heard whispers of the ovulation scandal tied to the Pierce Foundation. I gave a single statement. I believed in love once. Now I believe in truth. Let that be enough. I walked to my car, the sun warm on my skin, the air finally breathable. And for the first time since Isabel handed me that ultrasound, I knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Kyle's name had stopped being spoken in our home long before I confronted Isabel. Not because he vanished, but because his presence lingered silently in our routines, contaminating the space between words and moments. The betrayal didn't scream, it hummed underneath everything. After the court hearing, I thought I'd felt the full weight of what she'd done. I was wrong, because while the lies were public now, the impact kept unfolding in layers, revealing how deep the manipulation truly went. 2 weeks after the verdict, Cleo called me into her office. She rarely requested in-person meetings unless something significant had surfaced. "You may want to see this," she said, sliding a slim manila folder toward me. I opened it, expecting more legal cleanup, perhaps Kyle contesting the defamation implications, or Isabel attempting to file an appeal. But it wasn't that. It was a transcript of conversations, texts Isabel had sent to her closest friend, Sapphira Lavande. Cleo had obtained them through legal subpoena, part of an internal strategy to block any inheritance claims Isabel might attempt via moral loopholes. The content was brutal. Page after page of Isabel mocking me, calling me emotionally dense, obsessed with control, and worst of all, too dull to notice Kyle was better in bed. I paused on that line, not because I believed her, but because I could feel the satisfaction in her voice behind those words. Not only had she betrayed me physically, she had distorted my very identity in her narrative to others. Her affair wasn't just a secret, it was a performance. She had sold me to her friends as a tired man too consumed with precision and legacy to see passion. I pushed the folder away. "That's enough." But Cleo leaned forward. "There's something else." Sapphira sent Isabel a screenshot from her Ovuline app during the period she claimed she was ovulating. I cut in. "The day she was in Atlanta." Cleo nodded. "Exactly." She manually changed her ovulation window on the app, tried to realign it to match our timeline. The tech team flagged it. Log entries prove the original window put her peak fertility during her trip to Wynwood, when she was with Kyle, not with you. The silence in the room grew heavy. "She tried to tamper with her own app log?" I said, incredulous. "She didn't know it was backed up to the cloud in 2 formats. Most users don't." "She left a trail," I said. "She buried herself." The next step wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. I needed to rebuild what was mine without the contamination of her deceit. I reached out to my PR strategist, Dana Wolf, and began crafting a quiet exit strategy for all public affiliations Isabel had tainted. I transferred the Pierce Foundation's Women in Art initiative to Camilla's management, rebranded every co-named program to sever Isabel's legacy, cut KL from every future catalog. Behind the scenes, I became invisible, strategic, exact. And then I went to therapy. It wasn't weakness, it was intelligence. You've been holding your breath for years, Dr. Callum said in our first session. This isn't just about betrayal, it's about erasure. You were erased in your own marriage. That line stuck with me. Erased. Around that time, I received an unexpected email. The sender? Adriana Lira, a name I barely remembered, an associate from one of our early foundation grants. She used to manage grants to LGBTQ+ artists back when Kyle was still trying to get his first major installation sponsored. Her message was brief. Mr. Pierce, I regret not speaking up earlier. There are details I think you deserve to know. About Kyle, about what Isabel planned. Let me know if we can talk. Adriana. We met the next day at a coffee shop in Coral Gables. She wore no makeup, dressed plainly, but her eyes were sharp. I knew about the pregnancy before you did, she said bluntly. Kyle told me it was an accident, but that Isabel planned to raise the baby under your name to secure your estate. I didn't blink. He said that directly? She nodded. He said you were too loyal to ever question her, that she'd pull it off as long as she could fake the timeline. They weren't just lovers, they were strategizing. The weight of it landed in my gut like a second betrayal. I had never been a man prone to victimhood, but this was warfare. Psychological warfare. Why tell me now? Adriana's voice cracked. Because Kyle did something similar to my brother. Used him, humiliated him, then discarded him when it got complicated. I should have warned you sooner. That night, I reopened the notes I'd kept since the unraveling began. Every log, every receipt, every app screenshot. I organized it like a case file, not because I needed it for court, but because I needed to see the full picture. It wasn't just that she lied. She engineered a reality that demanded I play the fool. And now that reality had collapsed, all I had left were the facts and my dignity. The next morning, I paid a visit to Isabel's new condo. Not to rekindle anything, not even to talk. I delivered a single envelope. Inside it was a photo of the original Ovulation data logs, a printout of Kyle's messages, and a note written in my handwriting. You tried to weaponize biology, but you forgot. Truth has a memory longer than lies. I didn't wait for her to open it. Days later, Camilla invited me to attend the annual gala for the Pierce Foundation, one I had almost canceled this year. But something shifted in me. I didn't want to hide. I wanted to stand tall in the space I built, even if it had been scarred by deception. I arrived in a charcoal suit, alone, greeted by dozens of familiar faces. Some avoided eye contact, others overcompensated with kindness. But what struck me most was this. I no longer cared what they thought. During my speech, I said nothing about Isabel or Kyle. I didn't need to. I focused on legacy, truth, resilience. My closing line silenced the room. Sometimes the deepest wounds reveal what we're truly made of. And from that, we build again, smarter, stronger, quieter. Applause broke out. Dana caught my eye, nodding with approval. After the gala, I stepped outside to find Kyle standing by the valet lane, arms crossed, sunglasses gone. He looked thinner, faded, like a man who lost his muse and couldn't pretend otherwise. You think you won, he said. I studied him. I didn't win. I endured. There's a difference. Isabel's lost everything. She earned it. He flinched. I was good for her, you know. I'm sure you were, until it got hard. Then you disappeared. I didn't wait for his reply. I walked away before the valet could bring his car around. Weeks later, Cleo finalized the last phase of the estate protection order. Isabel could never again make a claim on the Pierce legacy, financial or otherwise. Kyle's name was scrubbed from every document associated with our charity network. He moved out of Miami within the month. Rumor had it he tried to start fresh in New Orleans, but burned bridges followed him like shadows. Meanwhile, I shifted my focus. I expanded the foundation's reach. I mentored young architects. I started writing again, essays about resilience, about masculine silence, about emotional literacy in the face of betrayal. They got picked up by digital outlets I once ignored. And then, one afternoon, I received a handwritten letter. From Isabel. It wasn't an apology. Not truly. It was a recollection of our first vacation to Santorini, the way I used to trace her back with my hand at night, the quiet mornings we shared. She ended with, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know you were real to me. I just couldn't handle being seen." I read the letter twice. Then I burned it. Not out of anger, but because I no longer needed her memories to validate mine. Later that night, I sat on the penthouse balcony with Camilla, who had stopped by with Marley again. The city pulsed below us, loud, alive, unapologetic. "You good?" she asked. "I think I am," she smiled. "You know you're a legend now, right? The man who found out through an ovulation app." I laughed. Honest, belly-deep laughter for the first time in months. "Yeah," I said, "but I'll take being a man who rebuilt himself over a man who never learned the truth." I wasn't a man who cried easily, but that night in the quiet of my hotel room, the tears came. They weren't loud or messy, just slow and hot, tracking over my cheekbones like rain on sun-scorched glass. I sat there in the corner suite of the W Hotel in Brickell, a skyline of indulgence and perfection outside the window, and realized my life, at least the version I'd been pretending was real, had just collapsed. The ovulation app had been the first clue. Isabel didn't even bother deleting the data, which was either arrogance or carelessness, or both. I'd reviewed her cycle data a dozen times that night before packing my bags. The conception date was not only incompatible with our intimacy, but eerily aligned with the weekend she flew to New York for her cousin's bridal shower. I remembered how she'd FaceTimed me from the hotel lobby, how the angle of the phone had seemed too perfect, how her laugh was just slightly off. My gut had spoken that night, but I had silenced it. Now, I was listening. I needed answers. But more than that, I needed the truth to unfold at my pace, not hers. That meant staying silent, biding my time, and collecting proof. I wasn't going to confront her in a blaze of anger and make it easy for her to spin the narrative. No, I was going to drag the truth out of her inch by inch until she had nowhere left to run. The first person I contacted was Elijah. Elijah Orozco was my closest friend from college, a cybersecurity consultant with a paranoid streak and a hacker's mind. He'd once cracked the Wi-Fi at the Beverly Hills Police Department just for fun. "Logan," he said when I called, "tell me this isn't another one of your high-stakes revenge missions." "This is different," I told him. "It's not revenge. It's truth. And I need your help." He didn't even hesitate. "Send me everything. I'll get back to you in 48 hours. While he combed through Isabel's phone backups, cloud syncs, and deleted photos, I played the part of the loving husband from afar. I scheduled a flower delivery to the penthouse, sent Isabel a voice memo saying I missed her, and even commented a red heart under one of her Instagram reels. She posted a yoga video that same day with the caption, "Center yourself, the truth is always within." I almost laughed. Truth? The only truth was that she was lying to my face and to the world, and doing it while pretending to meditate. 2 days later, Elijah called. "Logan," he said, his voice tight. "I have bad news. Really bad." I was already bracing for it, but I asked anyway. "Tell me." "She's been texting someone under the name Ray. It's a dummy contact, but when I reverse mapped the message backups, it was actually sent to a guy named Lucien." I swallowed hard. "Lucien who?" "Lucien Van Wyck. Yeah, that Lucien." Lucien Van Wyck was the son of a real estate mogul with holdings all over Coral Gables and Miami Beach. Openly gay, flamboyantly social, and dripping with inherited money, Lucien had a reputation for dating older men with influence or younger men with desperation. What the hell does he want with my wife? Elijah was silent for a moment. That's the part that gets weirder. I looked into his messaging habits. Lucien's been sleeping with Isabel, and not just once. They've had a full-blown affair for over a year. That made no sense. He's gay, I said. Bisexual, Elijah corrected. Or maybe just opportunistic. Either way, the evidence is solid. There are photos, screenshots, explicit messages. And the craziest part? I braced myself. She asked him to pretend the baby was yours. He agreed. The air left my lungs like I'd been sucker punched. Isabel had plotted to pass off Lucien's child as mine, and he was in on it. It wasn't just betrayal, it was conspiracy. I'm sending you the backup folder, Elijah said quietly. Logan, this goes deep. And it did. There were texts from Isabel about how she would stabilize the narrative, how she would rope Logan in emotionally before the second trimester, how he's too honorable to walk away from a child he thinks is his. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't rage. I got organized. First, I called my attorney, Maxine DuPont. Harvard Law, ice-veined, and known for her discretion, she didn't gasp when I told her what I was planning. She listened. Do you want a divorce? She asked. Eventually, I said, but not before I set the record straight. Good, she replied. Then you'll need leverage, full custody, asset protection, PR control, and if there's a paternity deception, we'll bring that into court. I sent her the evidence Elijah had gathered. She's planning to force me into fatherhood by deception. Maxine didn't say anything for a moment. That's reproductive fraud, she said finally. Rarely prosecuted, but it sets the tone for a brutal court battle. Good, I said coldly. Let's begin. Meanwhile, I returned to the penthouse. Isabel greeted me with wide eyes, as if surprised I hadn't bolted the moment she confessed her miracle pregnancy. I kissed her on the forehead, played the doting husband, and asked how the baby was progressing. She beamed. Everything's fine, she said sweetly. Thank you for trusting me. My stomach turned. We sat down to dinner that night, her favorite, grilled swordfish and shaved asparagus salad. She talked about planning a baby moon to Turks and Caicos. I listened. I nodded, and I let her speak. I noticed how she avoided eye contact when I mentioned the New York trip. I watched her closely as I asked about her friend Bianca, the one she claimed to have visited. Oh, Bianca, she stammered. She moved to Jersey. That's why I didn't post with her. Lie. Bianca had never left Miami. I'd seen her the week before at a conference. I smiled. We should all have dinner. It's been too long. Her eyes darted. Maybe. She's been busy. I leaned back. Of course. After dinner, I offered her a massage. Her body stiffened under my hands, not with pleasure but with guilt. I found the tension in her shoulders like knots of unspoken truth. She was unraveling, and she didn't even realize it. That weekend, I invited our close friends over for brunch, people Isabel normally curated carefully to uphold our image. There was Braden, a dermatologist with a podcast about ego and authenticity, and Maricela, an influencer turned holistic fertility coach. Isabel talked about the pregnancy glow, pretending nothing was wrong. I watched her pour orange juice with perfectly manicured hands and knew she was pouring lies with every word. After brunch, I walked Maricela to the valet. She seems different, Maricela said softly. Tense. She's pregnant, I said with a shrug. Maricela studied me. So you think? Her tone held weight. What do you mean? I asked. She called me 4 months ago, she said carefully. Wanted help tracking ovulation, but not with you. I froze. She said that? She didn't name names, Maricela admitted. But she told me you were on a break. She was exploring her options. I didn't realize you were still together. I nodded, filed the moment away, and knew it would be admissible in court. The next day, I ordered a prenatal paternity test. Isabel hesitated, then smiled. "Of course," she said. "I want you to feel secure." She didn't ask why I was suddenly uncertain. She didn't dare. I watched as the nurse performed the non-invasive sampling. Isabel played her part flawlessly, even complimenting the technician's scrubs. The results would take 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks, I built a war chest. Financially, I froze all joint credit cards. I shifted assets into separate trusts. I contacted HR to remove her as a dependent on my insurance. Quietly, legally, I pulled back everything she could cling to. Socially, I began informing my allies, people who mattered in the world of reputation. I told them carefully, with poise. "Isabel's expecting. We're navigating some complex news. I'd appreciate your discretion." Their eyes said more than their words. In Miami, whispers traveled faster than sound. By the time the test results arrived, I was ready. The envelope was thin. The truth inside was not probability of paternity. 0.0%. Isabel was carrying Lucien's child. That night, I returned home and found her lighting candles in the bedroom. She turned to me in lingerie I'd bought her in Milan. "Let's celebrate," she whispered. I handed her the envelope instead. She opened it. Her face paled. "You already knew," I said, my voice low. "And you thought you could manipulate me into raising someone else's child." Her mouth opened, closed. I continued. "Do you think Lucien will be a good father?" She slapped me. I didn't move. Her voice broke. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. You meant for me to raise it, fund it, be the fool in your picture-perfect lie." Tears spilled. "Please, Logan." I panicked. "He doesn't want the baby. He's not stable. You're the only man I've ever felt safe with." The irony of that statement made me laugh. "Then maybe you shouldn't have been screwing Lucien in a midtown hotel while texting me your affirmations." She fell to her knees, but it was too late. I walked away. I hadn't expected the silence in the penthouse to feel this suffocating. After the bombshell of the ultrasound photo and my quiet withdrawal from Isabel's delusion of a perfect family, I'd returned to Brickell Tower to find myself surrounded by marble, glass, and memories. Every corner of this apartment carried the weight of our curated lifestyle. And now, with each tick of the vintage Jaeger-LeCoultre clock on the wall, I was reminded how much of my life had been sculpted around her deceit. But I wasn't sitting in that silence anymore. I was building a case. One screenshot, one receipt, one exported ovulation tracker file at a time. Every app login, every synced data point, every shared calendar notification became digital threads in a noose she hadn't realized she'd tied around herself. The night she returned from her so-called wellness retreat, she didn't find an angry husband waiting to explode. She found a man who looked right through her. "Everything okay, baby?" she'd asked, gently peeling off her coat and smiling with that rehearsed warmth. Her eyes flicked to the dining table where a new bouquet sat, one she hadn't arranged. I stared at her. "Did you have a good time?" "Relaxing," she replied, stretching her arms like she was shedding the last of her guilt. "A little yoga, some beach reading. I needed that. Must have been nice to get away. You were ovulating last week, by the way. Funny timing." Her smile faltered. "What?" I leaned forward. "Your tracker, remember? The one you made me download when we were trying for a baby 2 years ago? Still synced to the cloud, still updating. I'm old-fashioned. I pay attention to the calendar. I don't believe in immaculate conception." She stood frozen, one heel halfway off. "Have a seat, Isabel. Let's talk about Emilio." Her whole body stiffened. That was it. No wide-eyed denial. No laughter. No "who's Emilio?" Just silence, like the room had dropped a few degrees. I didn't scream. I didn't curse. I walked her through the details like a boardroom presentation. Dates, flights, ovulation windows, private folder on a locked hard drive. I wasn't just confronting her. I was documenting her. "You're insane," she finally spat, her voice trembling. "No," I said softly. "You're reckless. You thought I wouldn't notice because I was busy. But I was busy building the life you're standing in, Isabel. You used that time to build a parallel one." She stepped toward me, rage contorting her features. "You want to tear this family apart over some paranoid guesses?" I handed her a manila folder. Inside were printouts of messages between her and Emilio, screenshots of hotel reservations, even one receipt showing a maternity tea order from a boutique in Coconut Grove, paid in cash, delivered to an address I didn't recognize. She flipped through them, and her hands started to shake. "You were never supposed to find this." "But I did, and here's what's going to happen." I didn't threaten her. I didn't raise my voice. I gave her terms, calm, methodical, and deeply unsettling. No public blowout, no drama, but also no mercy. "You'll go along with the divorce quietly. You won't contest the terms. You won't make a play for the penthouse or the West Palm Beach property. You'll waive rights to my holdings and exit with dignity, because if you don't, I will take every detail of this betrayal and place it in front of people who will tear you apart in court." "And what about the baby?" she asked, venom laced into the edge of her voice. "I'm not raising another man's child. You'll keep that between you and your conscience. Or better yet, Emilio." I left her sitting at the marble island, her carefully crafted facade collapsing under the weight of reality. My lawyers had already received everything. Copies were stored redundantly. She could lie. She could deny. But I'd stripped her of the power to spin her own narrative. The next escalation came from Emilio. I'd predicted it. He was arrogant enough to believe he had leverage. One evening, as I left a charity event, a man in a pressed blazer stepped out of a blacked-out SUV and fell into step beside me. "You're Logan Pierce?" he asked casually. I didn't look at him. "And you must be the accessory." He chuckled dryly. "Look, I don't want drama. Isabel's distraught. This is already spiraling. Maybe we can talk about a settlement." I stopped walking. "You don't talk settlements with a man whose home you trespassed in by proxy. You think just because you wear cufflinks and own a crypto firm that you know how to finesse a problem. You're not even original. You're a stereotype in designer shoes." He blinked, momentarily disarmed. "You thought you were seducing a lonely wife. What you were actually doing was stealing from a strategist. I knew about you before you knew about me. I've got a dossier on your assets, your scams, and your closet habits." His jaw tightened. "This doesn't have to get messy." "It already is. You're about to be a father to a child you didn't plan, by a woman who thought you were a midlife vacation." "The only person left with options here is me." And I walked away. What followed was the unraveling of their fantasy life. Emilio ghosted her for 3 weeks after that conversation. Her texts became increasingly desperate. I intercepted one message, sent to him, not me, begging for help to fix this before the lawyers got involved. My response was legal, not emotional. I filed the divorce papers. In them was a stipulation: mutual NDA, uncontested custody of our assets in my favor, and full relinquishment of marital claims from her side. She tried to bluff. "My father has friends in high places." "So do I," I said. "The difference is, I earned mine. Yours are generational favors waiting to expire." Then came the paternity test. Voluntary, at my suggestion. Not for me, but for documentation. When the results came in, confirming what we already knew, I watched the last remaining flicker of delusion leave her eyes. I moved quickly. While she unraveled in private, I began restoring what mattered. I rebuilt my schedule to be more present at home, not because I needed to perform fatherhood, but because my daughter needed a foundation. She'd been asking questions, subtle ones. Why does Mom always travel when I'm off school? How come you always have dinner with me, but she doesn't? I never answered with bitterness. I answered with stability. I'll always be here, I'd tell her. That's my promise. I didn't alienate Isabel to our daughter. I didn't need to. She was doing it herself. At school pickup, she was late more often. At events, she was on her phone or simply absent. I never said a word, but I documented every missed obligation. Not for revenge, just for court, because the next phase was custody. The hearing was short. My legal team came prepared with schedules, records, child psychology reports, and most damning of all, testimony from a private evaluator who had observed our daughter emotionally disengaging from her mother over the past 6 months. Isabel tried to pivot, to present herself as a victim of manipulation and abandonment, but under cross-examination, her own digital footprint told a clearer story. When the judge ruled in my favor, granting me primary custody with Isabel's visitation contingent on strict conditions, she didn't cry, she just stared blankly. A socialite undone by her own neglect, not just of me, but of the one person who needed her most. The final twist came when Emilio tried to rekindle contact. A desperate email. Maybe we could talk. I didn't handle things well. Isabel's scared. I didn't know she was serious about the baby. I replied once. Your mistake wasn't sleeping with my wife. It was assuming I wouldn't notice. You thought you were stealing something fragile, but you poked a man who doesn't break. I don't want her back. I don't want revenge. I want peace. And peace requires removal of chaos. Stay away, or I'll ruin your name in circles you haven't even entered yet. That was the last I heard of him. I've kept the penthouse. Not for the view, but for what it represents. A life reclaimed without noise, without scandal. My daughter laughs more now. We make pancakes on Saturdays. I take her to ballet and help with science projects. Isabel exists now only on a visitation calendar. She comes, she tries, but the bond between them is brittle, like someone trying to tape together a glass that's already shattered. And me? I've moved on. Not with another woman, not with a rebound romance, but with purpose. I've started mentoring young entrepreneurs, rebuilding my portfolio with focus. The betrayal no longer defines me. The recovery does. The day the legal subpoenas arrived at the penthouse, I wasn't surprised. I was prepared. I'd been building toward this moment with the precision of a man whose patience had been stretched to the point of breaking but not collapse. I had no intention of watching Julian or Dante walk away untouched. I had gathered every detail, every contradiction, every piece of evidence they thought was buried beneath layers of arrogance and lies. And now it was time to strip them bare. I watched from across the courtroom as Julian clutched her lawyer's arm, whispering with a pale face that gave away more than her words ever could. Dante, slick in his pinstripe suit and ring-heavy fingers, scanned the crowd as if his image still held power. It didn't. Not here. Not anymore. The documents laid on the judge's desk weren't allegations. They were certified financial forensics, emotional abuse records, recordings, app logs, and tracking data meticulously collected over months. And I had copies stored in multiple encrypted drives, including one handed directly to the court-appointed guardian ad litem. But this wasn't about revenge anymore. Not exactly. This was about regaining clarity, control, and protecting my daughter from the chaos Julian had normalized. Julian's attorney tried to feign shock when presented with screenshots from the ovulation tracker, entries cross-referenced with video timestamps from Dante's own tagged social media posts. The judge's eyebrows rose. The courtroom stiffened. I didn't flinch. Then came the receipts. Julian's attempts to modify medical forms to reflect my name as the father of a child who wasn't mine, confirmed by paternity tests, landed like a gavel on silence. She'd made the mistake of forging my initials. The lab technician who'd refused to alter the DNA logs. I'd already interviewed her. She testified in person. It was the first time Julian visibly crumbled. She dropped her pen. The facade cracked. But the true hammer didn't fall until the judge reviewed the custody motion I filed, alongside character affidavits from teachers, therapists, and even Julian's former assistant, all describing her erratic behavior and abandonment patterns. A private therapist, court-certified, detailed Livia's emotional regression under Julian's care. That testimony sealed it. The ruling didn't take long. Sole legal and physical custody, awarded to me. Julian was granted supervised visitation rights, subject to monthly court review and Livia's psychological comfort. It was a clinical takedown delivered with the full force of documented truth. Outside the courthouse, the press hovered, catching hints of tension, but not the full story. I kept my head down. I wasn't interested in a media war. I was interested in healing, in peace. For Livia, for myself. Back at the penthouse, I found Livia coloring quietly at the kitchen counter. She looked up, and I gave her a soft smile. "Hey, sweetheart," she beamed. "Did you win?" I knelt beside her. "We're safe now. That's all that matters." But that peace wouldn't be complete until one more lie was burned down. The following week, Julian held a press conference in a rented hotel ballroom, cloaked in crocodile tears, wearing beige like it was a shield. "I've been misunderstood," she crooned, "manipulated by those around me." She spun herself as the victim, painting Dante as a confused man and me as controlling. But she didn't know I'd already anticipated the move. While she spoke, a digital exposé dropped, curated by a discreet but highly credible independent journalist. It documented everything: time-stamped screenshots, transaction logs, Dante's anonymous burner emails, Julian's late-night movements tracked through rideshare receipts. The piece ended with a quiet note. Some men choose dignity over destruction, and still win. It went viral in hours. Within days, Julian's brand partnerships vanished. Her apartment lease was revoked. Her name stopped trending for fashion and started trending for fraud. Dante? He issued a statement claiming he was blindsided, misled, and grieving the loss of his public image. What he wasn't prepared for was the corporate audit that followed. Turns out several charity funds he managed were unaccounted for. That story broke 2 days later. I never raised my voice. I never retaliated. I simply let truth breathe. Weeks passed. One night I got a call from Julian's mother, Valletta, a woman I hadn't spoken to since Julian kicked me out. Her voice was dry. "She's at my place in Montauk," she said. "She's lost everything." I paused. "You called to tell me that?" She exhaled slowly. "No. I called to tell you. I was wrong about you." It was the first honest sentence I'd heard from her in years. By late April, Livia had adjusted to her new routine. She danced barefoot across the living room floor, laughing with freedom I hadn't seen in her in months. I watched her from the doorway, the sun bleeding through floor-to-ceiling windows, gilding her in light. I had nothing left to prove, nothing left to defend. I was free. But there was still a matter I needed to confront: my own silence. I'd let Julian dominate the narrative for too long. While I kept things private for Livia's sake, the world still believed pieces of a false version of me, a man who vanished, who couldn't handle fatherhood, who had walked away. That couldn't stand. So I wrote. I penned a guest op-ed for a national publication, under my own name. I told the truth without naming names. I spoke of betrayal, of fatherhood, of surviving a smear campaign with grace. I explained how data, not vengeance, had saved my daughter. and I reminded men that they could reclaim their dignity without violence, without spectacle. The piece was titled, "The Cost of Silence and the Power of Stepping Back In." It exploded. Messages flooded in, some from men in the same situation, others from women apologizing for judging too quickly, even a few from media figures who had once bought into Julian's version of events. But none mattered as much as the single line Livia whispered one night as I tucked her in. "You're the safest place in the world, Daddy." That was the real win. The financial settlement came quietly. Julian had no grounds for alimony after fraud was proven. I declined to press for damages. I didn't need her money. I'd rebuilt everything on my own. With endorsements, strategic consulting, and private equity work back in play, my income tripled what it had been when we were married. But even more than that, I'd reclaimed my name. Julian now lived in obscurity. Last I heard, she'd applied for a personal assistant job in Dallas and had been rejected when they Googled her. Dante had relocated abroad, tangled in international investigations. Me, I stayed right where I was. Livia and I spent Sundays making pancakes and playing chess on our balcony. She took up violin. I coached her in patience. And when she asked one day if people could stop being mean forever, I knelt and told her the truth. Sometimes people don't stop, but we don't let them decide who we become. She nodded like she understood. In the end, this wasn't a story about Julian or Dante or betrayal. It was a story about clarity, about standing still long enough to see everything clearly, and choosing with full power to walk forward anyway. I wasn't broken. I was awake. And I was finally home. My attorney, Valerie Greaves, looked up from the conference table, her fingers steepled and her expression coolly neutral. "Braden," she said, "you need to brace yourself. This is going to be ugly. But you will walk out of this courtroom with your soul intact and your daughter by your side." Those words grounded me like steel bolts in concrete. By now, I had learned not to flinch. Not at damning testimonies, not at falsified texts, not even at my wife's crocodile tears as she pretended to be the wounded party in a courtroom she had turned into a theater. Today wasn't about their lies anymore. It was about truth and letting it finally bleed out. That morning, outside the courthouse steps, I noticed the media vans before I noticed the protesters. A handful of them held signs championing women's rights in custody battles, which I could have respected, had it not been led by Cassandra's friend Valencia, the same woman who told me once, "Men like you shouldn't have kids unless you're ready to hand them off." Standing across from me now, Valencia had the smugness of a woman who thought truth was a variable. She didn't realize that receipts were coming, and I held them all. Valerie guided me through the security checkpoint with the calm of someone who'd seen far worse. My stomach churned. Today wasn't just a custody hearing. It was the culmination of betrayal, strategy, and survival. Inside, Cassandra sat next to her attorney, looking deliberately fragile. She wore pale makeup and a muted gray blouse, her attempt to echo victimhood. Her hair, once proudly curly and wild, was now straightened and tucked back, controlled, crafted. Beside her, Adrian. He wore a fitted navy suit and black-framed glasses, trying hard to project respected businessman. I couldn't help but notice the pearl bracelet on his wrist. It used to be mine, a gift from Cassandra, back when gifts had meaning. They refused to look at me. That was fine. They wouldn't be able to look at me once this was over either. Court convened. The judge, a meticulous, no-nonsense woman named Evelyn Carson, called the room to order. She was sharp. Her reputation was built on dissecting illusions and cutting through manipulation. I'd requested her courtroom. Cassandra's team had fought to avoid it. They lost. Mr. Maddox, Judge Carson said as she peered over her glasses, are you prepared to present your evidence regarding custody and financial misrepresentation? Valerie stood. Yes, Your Honor. The truth has waited long enough. She began with the messages, the edited screenshots Cassandra had submitted previously, trying to frame me as emotionally unstable and aggressive. Valerie displayed the original iCloud backups, dated and verified, showing Cassandra baiting me into arguments, then selectively capturing my reactions. We could hear a pin drop when Valerie played an audio clip of Cassandra laughing with Valencia on a phone call. If Braden goes down as hostile, it's game over for his custody rights. You just have to push a little, then save the texts. Cassandra's face blanched. Adrian looked down at his phone, suddenly busy. Valerie didn't stop. She brought up Cassandra's financial statements, contradicting her claims of being unemployed and dependent. Not only was Cassandra funneling cash into a separate account under her cousin's name, she had also bought Adrian a Tesla using funds from our joint savings, after we'd already separated. Receipts, dates, transfers, all laid out with brutal precision. Then came the ovulation tracker data. Valerie opened the period tracking app records Cassandra had backed up to her cloud. Your Honor, this timeline is critical. Ms. Maddox claims that Braden is the father of her unborn child. But as these logs indicate, she manually tracked fertility windows and intercourse, but only with Mr. Rivera during this period, not once with Mr. Maddox. The room murmured. Cassandra's attorney objected. Irrelevant. That data was accessed without permission. Judge Carson leaned forward. Was this account part of a shared iCloud network? Yes, Your Honor, Valerie said. And Mr. Maddox has legal access to all devices registered under that ID. It is admissible. Cassandra crumbled. It's a glitch. That app, No, Judge Carson said. It's a record. And this court recognizes the validity of digital timelines, especially when they align with paternity test results. Valerie handed over the sealed DNA report. Your Honor, the child is not Braden Maddox's. It is Adrian Rivera's. Adrian stood up. I want a lawyer. This was never my plan. Judge Carson's gavel cracked. Sit down, Mr. Rivera. We're not done. After the recess, it was my turn to speak. I stood slowly, scanning the room before meeting the judge's eyes. I never wanted this to become public. I never wanted to put my daughter through a court battle, but I didn't leave a marriage. I was erased from it, gaslit, lied to, replaced. I stayed silent when Cassandra took money and claimed I was unstable. I stayed quiet when Adrian moved into my daughter's life like I was dead. But my silence isn't consent, and my daughter deserves better than a story where lies win because the truth was too polite to fight back. I paused. Today isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming what was taken from me, my role as a father, my name, and my right to raise my child without manipulation. I looked over at Cassandra. You tried to rewrite history. You tried to build your legacy on the back of my sacrifice, but I documented everything, and now that truth has come home. When the final verdict came down, it wasn't even close. Full custody, Judge Carson said. To Mr. Maddox, visitation will be supervised until further psychological evaluation. As for the matter of paternity fraud and financial misconduct, she continued, this court refers Mrs. Maddox's case to the district attorney for further review. Valerie whispered beside me. That's code for criminal charges. Cassandra burst into tears, not sobs of regret, but rage. The courtroom had turned. Her image had cracked, and what was left behind was not a victim, but an architect of deception. Adrian tried to leave quietly. The bailiff stopped him. He was being subpoenaed for fraud. Poetic. After court, I stepped into the sunlight, holding Everly's hand. She was quiet, clutching my sleeve like it was a lifeline. Daddy, she whispered, can we go home now? I knelt down. We are home, baby girl. Wherever you and I are together, that's home. A journalist shoved a mic toward me. Braden, any comment on today's ruling? I looked at Everly, then at the mic. Yeah, document everything. Even the things you think won't matter later, especially the things that make you feel crazy. The truth always catches up. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't need to perform for headlines. I'd already won everything that mattered. Later that night, as Everly slept curled up against my chest, I scrolled through the messages flooding my phone. Old friends, new allies, strangers who had followed the trial. One read, "You fought like a ghost, silent but deadly." That was pure justice. But my favorite was from Valerie. "They underestimated your quiet. Turns out, that's where the power lived all along." I closed my phone and looked at my daughter. She breathed slowly, peacefully. Cassandra and Adrian had played with fire. They wanted control. They weaponized lies. But they forgot that the strongest men don't yell. They document. They endure. And when the time is right, they win. I stood on the balcony of my new brick-L penthouse, Leia's laughter echoing from the room behind me. Below, the skyline shimmered, unapologetically luxurious, just like the life I had reclaimed. No, rebuilt, brick by brutal brick. There was no hint of the man I had once been, blindsided, betrayed, and humiliated by the woman I married and the lover she hid behind staged smiles and lavender cologne. Now, all that remained of Celine Marquand and Sasha Loring's deceit were court documents, frozen bank accounts, and the distinct absence of their names from the headlines that had once devoured them. Justice had been served not through noise, but through precision. I didn't drag them publicly. I made them irrelevant. Celine had fled to Sonoma, renting a vineyard guest house owned by someone else's husband. Sasha, according to whispers from mutual acquaintances, was now managing a fitness studio in Vermont, where his reputation remained quietly tarnished by sealed civil settlements and severed contracts. They were both exiled from the circles they once adored, abandoned by sponsors, unfollowed by the very people who had once worshipped their curated chaos. I didn't need revenge. I had something far better: custody of Laia. Sole, undisputed custody. It wasn't just a legal win. It was the restoration of my life's anchor. Laia's eyes no longer carried confusion when she looked at me. She didn't flinch when Celine's name came up in therapy or hesitate when I tucked her in at night. My daughter knew where home was. She knew what presence looked like, what consistency felt like. That was worth more than any gloating headline. I stepped back inside, where the gentle hum of Billie Holiday played through the Sonos. Laia sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring a picture of our dog Wexley from memory. It was sloppy, slightly abstract, but deeply joyful. She looked up and smiled. "Daddy, can we get sushi again tonight?" "We can," I said, sinking to the floor beside her. "But only if you agree to try the salmon this time." "Deal." That was life now. Quiet, unspectacular victories woven into everyday moments. No more chaos, no more secrets. Just peace, with depth. Later that evening, after Laia had gone to bed, I scrolled through my messages and saw one from Lydia Benton, our longtime family therapist who had taken Laia on as a patient after the divorce proceedings finalized. "Lydia, Laia's progress has been phenomenal. Her drawing journal shows emotional stability and a strong sense of safety at home. I know you've heard this before, but you're doing everything right. She's lucky to have you." I stared at the message longer than I needed to. It wasn't that I needed the validation. It was just rare that someone said it plainly. That a man, a father, had done something not only difficult but deeply good. The kind of work that couldn't be seen on Instagram, but mattered. I put the phone down and walked into my study, where the documents were still stored in a locked cabinet. Celine's messages to Sasha, the medical records, the ovulation tracker screenshots, all filed away like artifacts in a museum I no longer needed to visit. They were preserved for legal formality, not emotional attachment. I didn't hate Celine anymore. I pitied her. She'd mistaken chaos for freedom, and thought deception was a path to power. In the end, she'd only freed me. I let her carry her consequences in silence. That was her new life now, a dimmed version of the world she once ruled. And the man she tried to build it with, forgotten. The legal restitution had been swift and airtight. Her attempt to challenge the prenup, citing emotional duress, had been crushed under the weight of digital evidence and cross-examinations that tore through her inconsistencies. My lawyer, Kira Madsen, had called it one of the cleanest dismantlings of character we've ever had to present. Celine lost everything she thought she was entitled to. The house, the art, the investment accounts, and most importantly, the narrative. She couldn't even twist the story in her favor anymore. The moment her affair timeline was cross-referenced with her fertility logs, the judge's demeanor shifted from professional to ice-cold. There was no saving her after that. The truth wasn't a weapon I wielded violently. It was a mirror I held up until she fractured. The next morning, while Laya was at school, I met up with Kira for coffee at Cipriani's, overlooking the water. She looked relieved for once, not in litigation mode, but finally relaxed. "You know what I respect most about you, Logan?" she asked, stirring her espresso. "That I pay my invoices on time?" She smirked. "Besides that, you never tried to humiliate her, even when you had every right." "That takes a rare kind of discipline." "I wasn't trying to win a battle," I said. "I was restoring a life." Kira nodded. "And it shows. The way you show up for Laya, it's visible. That girl is grounded." I exhaled. That's the only legacy I care about. That weekend, Laya and I visited the Vizcaya Gardens. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and held my hand tightly as we walked through the orchid greenhouse. "I like this better than Mommy's old friends," she said out of nowhere. I looked down. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. It's just, this feels real." I didn't press her. Children carry intuition most adults have long silenced. Later that evening, Celine called. It was the first time I'd heard her voice in almost 8 months. "Logan," she began, her tone cautious, thin with embarrassment. "Celine," I said, neutral. "I wanted to say thank you." That caught me off guard. "For what?" "For not destroying me publicly. You had every chance." "I would have deserved it." "I didn't need to," I said flatly. "Your actions did all the talking." There was silence on the other end, then a quiet sigh. "How's Laya?" "She's thriving." Another pause. "I hope one day she'll want to talk to me again." "That's her choice, not mine." "I know," Celine said, and for once, I believed the remorse in her voice was real, but too late to matter. When the call ended, I didn't feel righteous or vindicated. I felt still. I walked back to the kitchen, opened a bottle of Pellegrino, and looked out at the skyline again. Brickell was noisy at night, helicopters buzzing, Teslas rolling through intersections like ballet dancers in LED. I had chosen not to live for drama anymore. I chose stability, integrity, fatherhood. Months later, on Father's Day, Laya presented me with a drawing she'd made at school. It was us, me, her, and Wexley, standing in front of the ocean. Above us, she had written in crooked cursive, "My dad is my home." I didn't need anything more than that. Celine and Sasha faded into memory, symbols of delusion and deceit that never got the ending they expected. No applause, no comeback. Just the sound of a man they tried to break walking away completely intact, his child's trust in his hands, his dignity woven into every step. I was the victor, not because I sought revenge, but because I refused to become them. And that was the only justice that mattered. In the quiet aftermath of betrayal, it's easy to confuse pain with purpose. But sometimes, the deepest wounds don't ask for revenge. They ask for clarity. This wasn't a story about destruction. It was about what survives when everything false is stripped away. Dignity, presence, integrity. In a world that often rewards the loudest, the cruelest, or the most performative, true strength shows itself in restraint, in building, not breaking. There are moments in life when silence is louder than any confrontation, and walking away is the loudest answer. What we hold on to shapes us, but what we release defines us. And when trust is shattered, sometimes the greatest triumph is to rebuild something better, not in spite of the damage, but because of it. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey. If this story moved you or made you reflect, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your voice helps grow a community rooted in honesty, healing, and resilience. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story that cuts deep, stirs truth, and stays with you long after it ends. Until next time, stay grounded and stay true.